Hello everyone, hi. So today I want to talk about the 9 self-help books that I would actually still recommend many years after reading them, 5 to 10 years after reading them, in fact. So here's the thing about me and self-help books, I guess. I used to get into reading in my early 20s because I read a lot of self-help books. I was sort of on this wave of personal development, and the general assumption was that the more books you read, the better, and so I did. However, I transitioned away from that years ago, and I now study literature, so I'm much more into fiction, because I often find that those fiction books capture the human experience in a much more nuanced and compassionate way. However, those books I would still recommend to a friend in good conscience. There are also books that have really influenced my life. They have shaped my character in a way. So I have fond memories of reading them, and I want to tell you about them today. I'll read you some quotes and we'll have a little chat. If you're new here, welcome. I'm so happy that you clicked on this video. My name is Maria. I study comparative literature in Vienna, and I make videos here on this channel mostly about books, languages, and art. So I hope that you'll enjoy, and let's get into the video. So the first book I have here is Quiet by Susan Cain. And this is a book about introversion. So the subtitle says, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. I've been really introverted all my life, and I was sort of okay with that, and it was helpful to me to learn what introversion is. But this book has sort of solidified my confidence in the way I am a lot more when I read it. Yeah, I think I was like 20 or 21 or something. Well, she discusses, first of all, what introversion is. So there's like a little test in the beginning of the book, and she says, if you enjoy solitude, dislike small talks, when people tell you that you're a good listener, if you do your best work on your own and things like that, then chances are pretty high that you're an introvert. But she also talks about all the different sort of life situations and how to handle them as an introvert, and that it's okay to not like group work or group settings. Yeah, just sort of how the work and world structure is often overlooking preferences that introverts have. What I also really liked is that she discussed the difference between being introverted and being shy. I think that's really important. I'm very introverted, but I wouldn't consider myself shy at all, actually. Well, that was an important book for me to read when I was young, and I felt a little bit different than other people, and it really sort of strengthened my ability to believe in myself and to see how other great thinkers have been introverts too. I also like how she quotes some great writers, for example Kafka, and she says that Kafka has said to his wife that, "You once said that you would like to sit beside me while I write. Listen, in that case, I could not write at all. For writing means revealing oneself to excess, that utmost of self-revelation and surrender in which a human being, when involved with others, would feel he was losing himself, and from which, therefore, he will always shrink as long as he is in his right mind. That is why one can never be alone enough when one writes. Why there can never be enough silence around one when one writes. Why even night is not night enough." Yeah, there's also lots of talk about the school system and how, children are continuously told that they should speak more, or they shouldn't be so silent in class, and how it's just completely counter to how some minds work. And it talks about how to deal with all of that if you have children. I think it's a great book to read. And again, it's written in a very sensitive, lovely way. I really like this book. The next one is not technically, I guess, a self-help book, but it is always cornered as one, so I'm going to put it in here. This is the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor. And this is more or less his diary, or his sort of rules of life that he tried to live by. And it's just brilliant, first and foremost, to be able to read that. I think that is really impressive. And what is even more impressive is that even though he was so powerful, he really cared about developing his own character and being just. And that's what you see in this book. So he's sort of writing to himself, affirming how to be a stoic, just, balanced person in this world. So, for example, he writes, "When faced with people's bad behavior, turn around and ask when you have acted like that. When you saw money as a good or pleasure or social position. Your anger will subside as soon as you recognize that they acted under compulsion. What else could they do?" Or, "A healthy pair of eyes should see everything that can be seen and not say, 'No, too bright.' A healthy sense of hearing or smell should be prepared for any sound or scent. A healthy stomach should have the same reaction to all foods as a mill to what it grinds. So too, a healthy mind should be prepared for anything. The one that keeps saying, 'Are my children all right?' or 'Everyone must approve of me,' is like eyes that can only stand pale colors, or teeth that can handle only mush." I looked a lot into translations before buying this, and the Gregory Hayes is the best that I have found. I've had a lovely morning ritual years and years ago at this point. I would always get up in the morning, and then one of the first things I did is I read a page or two of this, and I really felt like it was setting me up to just have a really calm, intentional day. So I have very fond memories of that time in my life. Okay, next, Cal Newport, Digital Minimalism. So Cal Newport suggests in this book that one can live better with less technology, right? That's the subtitle. And he first discusses the problems with technology, with being constantly on screens. I think that's pretty obvious, but still good to hear. And then he suggests a sort of challenge to live without technology for 8 weeks. So without any technology that you don't super necessarily need, right? So you can have your phone for calls, and if you need to access your emails for work, that's fine. But sort of cut out everything around it. And then slowly, after those 8 weeks, you can reintroduce the things that really serve you. And throughout those 8 weeks, there's, I think, 8 chapters in this book where he talks about the importance of decluttering, of spending time alone, and things like that. I did that. I didn't do it for 8 weeks. I think I did it for 3 weeks. And then something happened. But it's still such a breath of fresh air to go into that direction. And I still think that even though it was only 3 weeks, I'm still a lot more intentional with sort of my screen time and what gadgets I get and put into my life, and how to choose things that are serving me. Yeah, I also like that he quotes Thoreau a lot throughout the book. For example, that Thoreau writes in Walden, "They honestly think there is no choice left, but alert and healthy natures remember that the sun rose clear. It is never too late to give up our prejudices." And he also says that spending time alone is sort of a resource that is under attack, and that there are like crucial benefits to solitude, you know, amongst which are new ideas and understanding of the self and also closeness to others. Okay, The Road Less Traveled came out in the 70s or 80s, and it to me seems to be the original self-help book back when it wasn't cool yet. This book covers everything from love and relationships to discipline, religion, spirituality, how to find meaning in life. And the great thing is, it says in the beginning of the introduction, I'll just read you this paragraph because I think it sums it up perfectly. The most common response I have received to The Road Less Traveled in letters from readers has been one of gratitude for my courage, not for saying anything new, but for writing about the kind of things they had been thinking and feeling all along, but were afraid to talk about. And this book feels exactly like that. And I love how the actual book starts then. He says, life is difficult. This is a great truth, one of the greatest truths. It is a great truth because once we can truly see this truth, we transcend it. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and accept it, then life is no longer difficult. Because once it is accepted, the fact that life is difficult no longer matters. The thing I still most remember from this book is how he talks about discipline and that, well, the road less traveled, I should have said that in the beginning, but he basically says that there's two ways to live life, to either go the road that most people go or to take the road less traveled. And the road less traveled in terms of discipline is to realize that maturity means to be able to delay gratification, and that people who are able to do that will live an overall much happier life. He says freedom and discipline are indeed handmaidens. Without the discipline of genuine love, freedom is invariably non-loving and destructive. I really appreciate how non-pretentious it is. All right, next one. Maybe I should put this stack over here. Next one, Lost Connections by Johan. This is a book about depression and all the known causes for depression and all the cures for depression. So he talks about the fact that, the amount of the percentage of people being depressed is sort of rising in a dramatic way, and that most people who take antidepressants don't usually end up feeling a lot better, / it's not curing their depression, it's just a band-aid, and that there are just other factors that we can look out for in a society, but also individually, that will make people's depressive symptoms a lot better. So he spends the first half of the book talking about all the problems and how we're so disconnected from nature, from each other, from a secure future, from meaningful values, and all that. And then the second half of the book, he spends discussing some possible solutions. So, community projects, therapy, psychedelics, universal basic income. And this feels like a truly well-researched book. And even though I'm not suffering from depression, these principles really helped to guide my life in a way where I'm taking good decisions to set my life up in a way that makes me happy. Yeah, so he says, for example, this evidence has been followed up several times since, and the proportion of people on antidepressants who continue to be depressed is found to be between 65 and 80%. Yeah, and then he talks about community projects, and that one study in Norway found that a program like this moved people on average 4.5 points on the depression scale, more than double the effect of chemical antidepressants. So what's also great about this book is he's not sort of anti-medication or anything. He just, to me, it feels like he's putting medication in its right place, and that it might not be necessary for quite as many people as we think it is, and that there's just other things one can do as well. Book number 6. Peter Schellenbaum, Das Nein in der Liebe. I only have the German version here, but I'm 99.9% sure this has been translated to English. It will be probably The No in Love, or saying no in love. The book is exactly about that. So Peter Schellenbaum was a Swiss psychologist, psychotherapist, sorry, and he says that saying no is part of love, part of real love, part of being in a relationship is to sort of define the border between you and the other. But beyond that, he offers a sort of almost spiritual perspective of how to deal with the things that trigger you in another person, and how to see it as a reflection of yourself, and how to either distance yourself from it, how to work with it, and how to stay open and loving in that. And he sort of differentiates two kinds of people: the ones that do that and that stay open to those challenges, and he calls them the erotic living being, or the ones that don't do that and sort of harden over time. And it is focused on relationships, partnerships, but I don't know, I think it can be applied to sort of any person you interact with, even children. Yeah, there's also a great chapter about the ideal couple that we all seem to imagine, and how that doesn't exist, and how it's not actually good to not have any fights or anything, and how it's also not good to sort of melt into one being and lose all of your individuality. And there's also some chapters on homosexual fantasies in heterosexual people, about loving without necessarily being sexual, how like a sexual engagement with life or with people doesn't necessarily need to be through sex. It can be through art or conversations or anything like that. And there's also a chapter on sort of the toxic masculinity. Yeah, I mean, I'll read you a quote. It's in German, but yeah. Jeder Mensch kann die Erfahrung machen, dass die verschiedensten Formen der Hingabe, etwa in der tätigen Hilfe, im künstlerischen Ausdruck, im engagierten Gespräch und in der Sexualität, in ihm ähnlich belebende Gefühle des strömenden Einsseins hervorrufen, falls es wirkliche Hingabe ist, die ihn bewegt und nicht nur Selbstbestätigung. Nicht sexuelle Ausdrucksformen des Eros sind keine Umwege des Sexualtriebs, sondern authentische Variationen der eigenen Hingabe. Schließt jemand die sexuelle Bindung ganz aus seinem Leben aus, muss er allerdings eine sehr starke andere Form der Hingabe wählen, die in ihrer Intensität der sexuellen Hingabe mindestens gleich ist. Sonst verknöchert er in seinem Ich. Alright. Oh, this might be the last self-help book I ever read. Integral Life Practice by Ken Wilber, Terry Pattern, Adam Leonard, and Marco Morelli. So I read a lot of Ken Wilber. He's an amazing thinker and intellectual who has really tried to integrate all kinds of models of human development into one model, like a really meta sort of thinker, really balanced. I appreciate that about him. Most of his books are very theoretical though, and in this book, with 3 other people, put everything he knows into a practical, applicable framework for one's life. So a person who cares about developing themselves, how would they structure their life? Because Ken Wilber is so meta, this book encapsulates everything that I have read in so many different books just in one book, and it's really practice oriented. So I'm still basing my morning routine, for example, on what he proposes in this book. So he says to take care of the mind, the body, the spirit, and the shadow. Yeah, he says, for example, many people view the mind as an obstacle to spiritual growth. We are urged to go beyond the mind, to let it go, to drop it, get out of your mind and into your body. But integral life practice includes the mind and intellect. It doesn't leave them behind. It makes the mind a dimension of practice. Clear thinking is necessary for cultivating moral clarity, conscious choice, and even compassion. I have to be able to first take your perspective, which is a mental act, in order to empathize with you. It takes a healthy, developed mind to be truly spiritual. Yeah, so he says free consciousness is not dissociated from heart or mind. It both thinks and feels. It is not lacking in feeling, nor is it lacking in discriminative intellect. Feeling is awareness. Awareness is feeling. Ah, look at this gorgeous spiral dynamics chart. Amazing. I mean, I just want to sort of re-emphasize that I really like that he put so much No. I think the last thing I want to say about this book is that I truly appreciate how much emphasis he puts on working on one's shadow, because I feel like it's not very often talked about in other personal development books I read, and it's such a huge part of becoming more content with your own life and making good decisions. So yeah, also the format of this book is just perfect. To me, this is the perfect book. Like, I love how it's almost square and how heavy it is and how big the pages are. It's just, I don't know, this is a great format. Okay. Last two. So, The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden. This is truly, I feel like, the only book about self-esteem that you'll ever need to read. And it's the opposite of sort of trying to boost your confidence in some quick fix way. No, he talks about literally the 6 pillars that carry your self-esteem. And he says that those pillars are the practice of living consciously, the practice of self-acceptance, the practice of self-responsibility, of self-assertiveness, of living purposefully, and of personal integrity. So he says that if one or more of these pillars are wobbly, your self-esteem is going to suffer from it. And he brings many, many examples in this book, and to me it's just a good reminder to go back to over and over again. I actually wrote is that called a dissertation? I'm not sure. The first degree I did, my end work there, I based it on this book. Oh, actually, yeah, I have it here. And it starts with a Nathaniel Branden quote. Yeah, so this is the first page of my end dissertation. And it reads, "Of all the judgments we pass in life, none is more important than the judgment we pass on ourselves." Nathaniel Branden. Yeah, I wrote it about how to build self-esteem with people with mental disabilities in a farm or outside work kind of setting. Very specific. But anyways, I know this book through and through, and I truly appreciate it. It's just, if you feel like you want to know anything about self-esteem, I mean, that's the book to go to. And then the last one is Alice Miller's The Drama of the Gifted Child. I don't have that much to say about it other than if you feel like you're very empathetic and you're very good at being there for other people, listening, maybe read this. Could be very revealing. I know it was for me. She talks about basically childhood trauma and how it shapes our empathy. Yeah, I think it's a good sort of beginner work to get into the topic of trauma. She says, "Experience has taught us that we have only one enduring weapon in our struggle against mental illness, the emotional discovery of the truth about the unique history of our childhood. In order to become whole, we must try in a long process to discover our own personal truth, a truth that may cause pain before giving us a new sphere of freedom. If we choose instead to content ourselves with intellectual wisdom, we will remain in the sphere of illusion and self-deception." I might, again, if you're maybe also a therapist or a social worker or something where you're like empathizing with people, just read it. It's not a very long book, and tell me what you think. Okay, that's it for the self-help books. I mean, truly, they're great. However, considering the amount of books I read in that genre, it's not that many. And I think that is what eventually steered me away from self-help books. It's so easy to get a bad one. I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you so much for being here. I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.